All right, team, welcome back to another episode of the Exceptional Leadership Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Matt Hamilton. Delighted to be with you for the first episode of a brand new year, 2026, and I'm sure it's going to be a fantastic one for all of us. I do hope that over the Christmas period you were able to get away and have a bit of a break. I know I did. I was able to spend 3 or 4 weeks away from the office, which was fantastic. A really good opportunity to recharge, refresh, and I think that's going to enable me to attack this year in a really good fashion. I hope that is the case for you as well. But we're going to continue where we left off, crew. It was a strong year last year for the show. We covered some really interesting topics, and this year will be no different. And I wanted to kick us off with a look at a guy called David Goggins. So ex-US Navy SEAL, really interesting guy, basically a bit of a mental coach these days, has written a book and has some really interesting theories on overcoming adversity and besting yourself, basically. So we'll go into a little bit of a spiel about who he is and what he's known for. And then I want to play with a tactic of his known as the cookie jar. And we're going to discuss together how you can use the cookie jar to get you through difficult moments that you're going to face, not only in your leadership journey, but also just throughout general life, right? Life throws things at us, and it does require some resilience to get through. Here we go. So David Goggins is a former US Navy SEAL, ultramarathon runner, ultra-endurance athlete, and one of the most well-known figures in modern mental toughness culture. He is also the author of a book called Can't Hurt Me, which is the one that I've got back up here on the shelf, and another book called Never Finished. I haven't read that one, but I'm sure it is good. So Goggins is known for his extreme physical feats and his blunt philosophy about discipline, suffering, and personal responsibility. And blunt is absolutely the word. If you've ever heard him talk, generally every second or third word is the F word, so probably not work safe, but it doesn't really dilute the message. He's just passionate about what he does and his thoughts on things. So who David Goggins is, let's do a little bit of a snapshot. So he grew up in an abusive home and struggled with obesity, learning disabilities, and some self-doubt. He ended up losing over 100 pounds to qualify for Navy SEAL training. He completed Navy SEAL training, Army Ranger School, and Air Force Tactical Air Controller training. He competed in ultramarathons, Ironmans, and set world records in pull-ups. And lastly, he uses his life story to teach mental resilience and self-mastery. His ideas aren't about comfort or balance. They are instead about deliberately embracing discomfort to build an unbreakable mindset, is the way that he puts it. So before we dive into the cookie jar theory, as discussed in David Goggins' book called Can't Hurt Me, recommend picking up a copy of that if you can. I want to talk about the reason behind why I wanted to discuss this today. And, I've been in many organizations where we've undergone periods of change, intense change and uncertainty. And in a leadership position, that is a really tough spot to find yourself in, because often when you're in middle management and junior management, even senior management sometimes, you have absolutely no control over what is being changed within the organization. These decisions are being made at a pay grade much greater than yours, but you're still having to not only keep yourself level and logical and calm during these uncertain times, but you're also having to deal with the uncertainty and the anxiety that this change is causing in people that you lead, or in colleagues that you work with. And for those of you who have experienced this, you'll know that the environment can turn really negative very, very quickly. And change rarely concludes in an efficient, timely fashion in organizations. It often drags on for ages, 6, 12, 18 months. So it's a prolonged period of stress for all involved, basically. There's often uncertainty, and people who are not in the know and who are not driving the change are often very negatively affected. I think I've quoted this on the show before, but there's actually scientific evidence in the form of surveys and research that shows the use of antidepressants and SSRIs actually skyrockets in employees during times of change. So it really freaks people out. And we know from previous episodes that your communication as a manager in those instances becomes even more important because people are thirsty for it. They want to know that their manager is a safe space and that the leader is going to be open with them and tell them what they know. They're looking for someone who they can trust amidst all of this uncertainty. So it's a very tricky spot to find yourself in. It doesn't conclude quickly and it seems to drag on and on. Now, the reason I want to talk about this cookie jar theory is because it's really difficult to manage your own emotions when you're in a position of uncertainty yourself and perhaps not sure where you're going to end up personally, whilst also trying to manage that emotional negativity that everybody else is demonstrating, right, underneath you, and they're looking to you for answers. So how can you manage them if you're struggling to manage your own mental state? Very, very taxing and tough to do the job well. Negative environments tend to mean that people fall to the lowest common denominator. And what I mean by that is people very rarely rise, right? They don't become more positive in a negative environment. If it's an overwhelmingly negative space, generally people will tend to become more negative rather than more positive. We fall to the lowest common denominator. So it's very, very tough mentally and emotionally. But the cookie jar theory, as it applies to leaders like you and I, is one that David Goggins tends to focus on as a core mental tool. Now, the basic idea of this is that your mind has a cookie jar that is filled with memories of hard things that you've survived in the past, pain you've previously endured, discipline you showed when quitting would have been a lot easier, and moments where you didn't do what everybody else was doing. You didn't take the easy option. You took the hard decision. You took the hard road, and you did what others wouldn't. So you could say that when life gets hard, you reach into the cookie jar, you mentally eat one of those cookies, and you remind yourself, hey, I've been through worse than what this is right now, and I didn't quit, so I can get through this scenario as well. Now, how it works psychologically is when you are, whatever it might be, in a distressed state, tired, stressed, scared, overwhelmed, your brain does try to convince you that the best and safest thing to do is to stop and seek safety. The cookie jar counters that by reinforcing proof of capability, shifting the focus from the current pain to past victories and using that as a bit of a mental oasis to get you through this difficult moment. And thirdly, it builds confidence through evidence, not motivation. And that's a really key point, guys, because evidence is surety, isn't it? Motivation's difficult to maintain, but evidence is concrete, right? So it's very powerful. It's not about positive thinking, it's about earned belief. So let's play with an example. Navy SEAL training, that's something that David Goggins speaks about a lot in his book, right? Imagine you're exhausted during Navy SEAL training, right? During a workout, maybe, to bring it back to the common man and woman sort of level. Or you're facing a difficult life situation. We've all faced those. Instead of thinking, I can't do this, what you're going to do is you're going to deliberately recall, for example, the time that you trained when you didn't want to. The time where you were driving home from work and the last thing you wanted to do was turn left and go to the gym. You wanted to turn right and go home to the couch, have a beer, have a wine. But you didn't. You turned up to the gym anyway, and you actually had a great workout and felt fantastic. Maybe it'll be a past failure that you survived. Or maybe it's a moment that you pushed past your limits and achieved something that you didn't know or believe you were capable of. The memory then becomes fuel because it creates an emotional reaction. It changes your emotional state. And you think, I did that. This particular situation I'm facing now is nothing compared to that. Or these past successes are evidence that I can too overcome this. Now, some important nuance that is often missed is that these cookies have to be earned, right? So we're not talking about, past successes that were achieved comfortably. We're not talking about easy wins. They don't count. We're only interested in suffering and scenarios where it took real discipline to achieve what you achieved. And that constitutes a real cookie. If you avoid hard things, the jar is empty when you need it most. And that's a good way to think about how we approach future challenges. We can go, well, look, this is a difficult thing, but perhaps not only are we able to reach back into history from a mental perspective and go, well, I did this, so that's evidence that I can get through this too, but maybe we can bolt further motivational energy onto this present challenge and go, this is going to be one of those cookies in future that I'm going to reach back and reference when I do overcome this thing, right? So we can also look at it from that angle, that this, although it sucks right now, and I wish I wasn't having to endure this, you reframe it and you go, this is going to benefit me in future. This is going to be a lesson. This is going to be a source of motivation. So that's something else that I want you to think about. In one sentence, the cookie jar is the mental habit of using past suffering and discipline as proof that we can handle the challenge that we're currently faced with. And building our own cookie jar is really important. We accumulate more experiences, i.e. cookies, obviously as we get older and as we accumulate life experiences. So it's a really interesting little topic that I wanted to delve into today, and one that is very relevant, I think, particularly for these periods of organisational change, which are so common. Organisational change tends to occur every time you get a new CEO or a new, executive board member, right? It's this constant cyclical thing. And when you are in those middle management, junior management ranks, and you're committed to doing a great job from a leadership perspective, people look to you and you take that seriously. And because you see the anxiety on their face and the uncertainty in their world, and then you think of the bigger picture, i.e. this anxiety is driven by, hey, what happens if I lose my job? That's what the uncertainty is. Am I going to be able to pay my mortgage? Am I going to be able to find another job if I get laid off? It's really Maslow's hierarchy of needs sort of stuff that is causing people to exhibit this anxiety. And you are a very important person in the lives of those individuals. It's not a responsibility to be taken lightly. So it is important that we take this cookie jar theory seriously and we work out how we can make sure we're performing optimally so that we can help those that look to us for leadership in those uncertain times. And if you haven't experienced it yet as a leader, I guarantee the time will come. So prepare now. Taking things outside of the corporate world, the corporate landscape, because we know challenges certainly don't just exist in that forum. You can also use the cookie jar approach to get through really difficult patches that life will inevitably throw at us. So let's make sure that we are building on that theory, boosting our internal and mental resilience, and getting benefit across the board, both in and outside of the boardroom. Guys, I'm going to leave it there. Just a nice little succinct one to get us kicked off for 2026. Hey, as I always do, I would really appreciate your help in growing the show. The best form of marketing is word of mouth. Maybe we'll do an episode on that one day, because I do like the business aspects, all-round business aspects. I'm quite passionate about talking about all elements of it. The best word of mouth is marketing, and the only ones that can help me spread the word far and wide is you guys. if you listen to the show and you get benefit, I'd really appreciate you recommending this podcast to a friend or a colleague, and spreading the word that way. If you're feeling super extra generous, if you'd share an episode on your social media platforms, that'd be an amazing help to the show. But I would really appreciate that. Of course, leave the show a 5-star review and maybe a nice comment on Spotify or whatever application you consume the show on. And I would also be eternally grateful for that assistance as well. But guys, until next time, about 2 weeks from now, stay safe. Hopefully take those lessons to heart and apply it to your own lives in and outside of the boardroom. And I sincerely hope that you get some benefit from what we talked about today. Until next time, I'll see you later.